According to Esquire, interviewing Keanu Reeves is difficult. He's a master at being polite to an almost surreal level, while dodging questions in such an artful way that many don't even realize he's doing it. He's also extremely private when it comes to his personal life, and that's left a lot of the details of his young life, well, a little hazy. As reported by The Guardian, Reeves' parents met on a beach in Beirut, and that's not the Beirut of the 21st century. This was the 1960s, when it was one of the places to be. Patricia Reeves had left England and found herself there, while Samuel Reeves was just sort of wandering his way across the world. Any more than that is less than clear. It's been reported that Patricia was working as a showgirl at the time the pair got together and had their first child, but Keanu has also mentioned that she was a costume designer. While Keanu was born in Beirut, his parents didn't stay there long. Keanu told Esquire, "I don't have any memories of it. I think I was only 6 or 7 months old when my parents left." His sister was born later, in Australia, and by the time Keanu was 3, his parents split, according to The Guardian. By the time he was 6, the small family had settled down in Toronto. Keanu has spoken a bit about the impact it had on him. For sure, I think it's definitely traumatizing, but I don't know what the other life would have been, you know what I mean? When Keanu Reeves spoke to Esquire in 2021, he talked a bit about his childhood growing up in Toronto. It was this sort of childhood that every Gen Xer will find comfortably familiar. At the same time, 21st century parents are being horrified. Some of his earliest memories are of playing hockey in the streets and having chestnut fights. Which is exactly what it sounds like, cracking open chestnuts and throwing them at each other. He talked about building go-karts, spending ages at the movies, and even the occasional candy theft. In a 2017 Esquire interview, he said, "We were latchkey kids. It was basically leave the house in the morning and come back at night. It was cool." Perhaps unsurprisingly though, he also liked his alone time. Taking advantage of the fact that children could ride the subway for a quarter, he'd often hop on and ride until he got to a stop that he wasn't all that familiar with. Then he'd just get off and wander, a pastime credited for his ability to feel at home in almost any city in the world. At the same time, his childhood was also pretty bizarre, with his mother working as a costume designer and his stepfather being a film and theater director. It meant that he met a lot of creative people. Alice Cooper was one of his babysitters, and he remembered meeting icons like Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris. Fun fact? The Independent says that Reeves' mother worked with Parton on multiple occasions and did the bunny costume for her 1978 Playboy cover. When Parton didn't keep the costume, it ended up going home with the designer, and Reeves wore it for Halloween. Keanu Reeves has starred in one of the most mind-bending movies in recent history. But what does he think about the possibility of a world that we can't see existing around us? It turns out that he's actually a believer, and he said so on Jimmy Kimmel Live. When Kimmel asked if he'd ever seen a ghost, he responded that yes, he had, as a child. The story is an eerie one, and he tells of being around 6 years old and living in New York. When people spoke to Paula Warder, Keanu Reeves' primary school teacher from the Jesse Ketchum Public School in Toronto, she remembered, "I don't think he ever got to a class on time, and when he did arrive, he wasn't quite, well, with it. He always left his books at home or forgot his homework, but he'd just smile and go back home and get them, and somehow he did pass his classes." When the Mail on Sunday sat down with Reeves, he revealed a few insights into his younger years, including his obsession with sci-fi. "I used to escape into another world as a kid. It was that whole idea of getting out of my own circumstances, a fascination with distant planets, unknown mysteries, going wherever the imagination could go. I loved Star Wars, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Blade Runner." He says that while he excelled at ice hockey, was good at English and writing, and he was on the chess team, his difficulties were, in hindsight, all on him. "I guess I didn't fit in. I had conflicts and run-ins with the staff. The principal and I didn't see eye to eye. I was one of those why kids. I asked too many questions about everything. I couldn't stop, even if it got me into trouble. I wanted my autonomy, and if you wanted to impose something on me, then you and I would have a problem." Perhaps unsurprisingly, Reeves' school career came to an abrupt end when he was expelled at 16, which he says was very upsetting. Reeves left home when he was 18, and by that time, Esquire says that he had 4 high schools under his belt and no diploma. Just 2 years later, he packed what he could into his 1969 Volvo 122 and headed to LA. While some actors might not get into the business until later in life, That wasn't the case with Keanu Reeves. He told The Guardian that his introduction came early, and it really started when his mother, who was working as a costume designer in Toronto, would send him to fetch materials and task him with cleaning up her studio in exchange for his weekly allowance. That may have been the beginning, but Reeves credits his mother's second husband, Paul Aaron, with getting him on set. He was 15 years old and on summer break from school when Aaron hired him as a production assistant on a Chuck Norris film called A Force of One. That perhaps sounds more glamorous than it really was, and Reeves said his main jobs included things like keeping crowds out of the way, fetching drinks, and making sure the snacks were kept appropriately cold. Decades passed between his first venture on a movie set and superstardom, but he still remembered, excitedly, bringing Claudette Colbert a Sprite. The whole time, he recalled, he was drinking it all in. I was watching the grips, I was watching actors, I was seeing how a film set really works, the call sheets, the generator, the lights, the lunch times. It's not too surprising to find out that Neo's real-life childhood was shaped by science fiction, and while Keanu Reeves picked it up in high school, he's said that it shaped who he is in many ways. His 2008 remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still would come in at a dismal 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, but he was optimistic when he spoke with the Mail on Sunday ahead of the film's release. It was kind of coming full circle for him. I loved the original Michael Rennie film. I remember seeing it first when I was 14 on a black and white television. It's a cautionary tale. The film is also about human nature, the fact that it's only when our backs are against the wall that we do anything to change. It's also sci-fi that's allowed him to put his career's letdowns in perspective, and he explained how to The Guardian. He was 18 years old and a massive Star Wars fan when Return of the Jedi was released. He said, "I went in like, wow, I wonder, are they going to do this and will they do that?" And then I was like, oh no. But that moment has helped him understand movie audiences who might be less than thrilled with what's unfolding on the big screen. And it's also that moment that's helped him accept that movies are the vision of their creators, not the audiences. It's their work of art, man. I try to come to their art and meet it wherever it is. In 2017, Jimmy Fallon described Keanu Reeves' name as pretty much perfect for an A-list movie star. But Reeves wasn't entirely sold and said that, in fact, not only had he not thought of his name as anything special while he was growing up, he had almost changed it when he first arrived in Hollywood. He recalled that it had been the very first day he met with his agent and his manager that they said they were going to change his name because, Fallon suggests, no one was going to hire Keanu Reeves. Reeves said that he took the whole thing incredibly seriously, knowing that whatever he picked was going to be his identity. So he headed to the beach and sat there as he reflected on what he wanted to be called for the rest of his life. What did the ocean suggest? Chuck Spadina. His agent, fortunately, said no. And although Reeves said he wanted to know what was wrong with Chuck Spadina, he gave it another go. He went back to them with a second option, Templeton Page Taylor. Needless to say, they let him stick with Keanu Reeves. Strangely, he also revealed on Jimmy Kimmel Live that yes, he's met another person that's named Keanu, and it's his cousin. How awkward is that?
I had never heard that name for another human until that moment, and I was just like, wow, okay, Keanu.
From blockbusters like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and action movies like Speed to heavy-hitting indie films, including emotionally heavy films like My Own Private Idaho, Keanu Reeves' career is almost shockingly diverse. But according to what he told The Guardian, he didn't really plan it that way, saying, "It wasn't as thought out as, okay, I finished Point Break, so now I better play a street prostitute." It was more like, okay, I finished this, now I want to do that. But here's the weird thing. Even though countless teenagers of yesteryear grew up seeing him in all the teen magazines and having posters of him on bedroom walls and lockers, Reeves told Esquire that his rise to stardom wasn't the nightly party and endless stream of fawning fans that one might expect. Everyone has those chance meetings that change a life forever, and for Keanu Reeves, that was meeting River Phoenix. In 1989, Reeves was cast in the Ron Howard flick Parenthood. Playing his girlfriend was Martha Plimpton, and at the time, her real-life boyfriend was River Phoenix. Her on-screen little brother was, incidentally, Leaf Phoenix, who would later go back to being called Joaquin. Reeves, Plimpton, and the two Phoenix brothers became real-life friends, hanging out on and off set. As detailed in Last Night at the Viper Room, River Phoenix and the Hollywood He Left Behind by Gavin Edwards, It was just before Christmas of that year that Reeves read the script for My Own Private Idaho by Gus Van Sant. Keanu then hopped on his motorcycle to ride from Canada to Florida and take it to Phoenix personally. In fact, this wasn't the first attempt to bring Phoenix on board. His agent had previously refused to even bring the script to him and his family, citing it as way too taboo for teen actors, who were more the stuff of Tiger Beat magazine than gritty indie films. But when Reeves brought the script to Phoenix, it got the ball rolling. After seeing Van Zant's Drugstore Cowboy, Phoenix was convinced, and the two actors later agreed to do the film, starring as sex workers with male clientele together. Phoenix later spoke about the idea of doing the movie his agent had refused to pitch him, but that Reeves had, saying, "We were excited, we just forced ourselves into it."
What's your most lasting memory from making this movie? River Phoenix.
The film was released in 1991, and by the time shooting was finished, a journalist reported that there wasn't much difference in his performance when the camera was rolling and when it was not. Phoenix, it turned out, was way deeper than anyone had guessed. 2 years later, on October 30th, Phoenix, Samantha Mathis, and two of Phoenix's siblings stopped at Johnny Depp's Viper Room. Phoenix wanted to stay, and although Mathis recalled, according to The Guardian, that he was high in a way that made her uncomfortable, they stayed. Just 45 minutes later, everything had changed, and Phoenix was dead. The official cause was a drug overdose. When Phoenix died, Reeves was just starting to shoot Speed with Sandra Bullock, who, Esquire said, happened to be friends with Mathis, Phoenix's then girlfriend. Bullock recalled, "I watched how Keanu grieved, and oh, did he grieve for his friend. He's very private, but he couldn't hide that." Nearly 30 years later, Reeves told Esquire, "I hate speaking about him in the past, so I almost always got to keep it present. He was a really special person, thoughtful, brave, and funny, and dark, and light. It was great to have known him, inspirational. Miss him." Keanu Reeves' dedication to keeping his private life private extends to his family too. According to Little Things, his sister Kim was diagnosed with leukemia sometime around 1991. For the next decade, she continued to fight the disease before finally going into remission. Reeves was at her side for much of it. People quoted an anonymous friend as saying, "When she was in the hospital, he was there with her all the time, sitting at her bedside, holding her hand." Unsurprisingly, it's had a lasting impact on Reeves. And while he's gone above and beyond to try to help other families going through similar things, he's super private about that too. In 2009, he revealed to Ladies' Home Journal, "I have a private foundation that's been running for 5 or 6 years, and it helps aid a couple of children's hospitals and cancer research. I don't like to attach my name to it, I just let the foundation do what it does." In 1998, Keanu Reeves met the love of his young life at a party. Her name was Jennifer Syme, and they immediately started dating. Unfortunately, the relationship had a tragic trajectory. Syme became pregnant, and in 1999, she gave birth to a stillborn baby girl they named Ava. According to Paper, Syme suffered from severe postnatal depression, and she and Reeves broke up only a few weeks later. Fast forward a bit. Syme was working as David Lynch's assistant when she met Marilyn Manson. She put the singer in touch with Lynch, and it led to their collaboration on Lost Highway, and Syme went on to become good friends with Manson. In April 2001, he invited her to a party. At some point, he got a designated driver to take her home, but it seems as though she later wanted to return. She got in her car, collided with 3 parked cars, was thrown from her vehicle, and was pronounced dead at the scene. Reeves and Syme had remained close even after breaking up. People magazine says they had been spotted having brunch the day before she died. They quoted a friend saying, "Reeves was finding it very, very difficult to cope with her death." Take a glance at Keanu Reeves' credits, and you'll see he's been working pretty consistently for decades. But that's a bit deceiving, and Reeves told GQ that he paid dearly for a choice he made a long time ago, turning down Speed 2. Regardless of whether or not reviews suggested he made the right choice, Reeves says he was blackballed by Fox for more than a decade after he turned down the sequel. He calls it movie jail. And GQ also notes that in the years since, he hasn't done too many studio movies that turn into a big deal. When he talked to Esquire, he referred once again to being sent to studio movie jail after the less than stellar performance of The Day the Earth Stood Still, a movie he calls The Day My Career Stood Still. Although it might seem impossible that a massive A-lister like Keanu Reeves still has some insecurities when it comes to his career, he says that the day the Earth stood still was a reminder that you're always fighting for a career. It was a lesson he learned early on. When he spoke to GQ in 2019, he was 54 years old. Was he content in his career? No, he said. And it was pointed out that in spite of his consistent work, he hadn't starred in studio production since the less-than-stellar performance of 2013's 47 Ronin. He was honest about what it was really like in the industry, telling a story about Anthony Quinn on the set of A Walk in the Clouds. Quinn, he said, was always on the phone and always checking on the next gig, even though he had been established for decades. When the young Reeves asked him if it was always going to be like this, Quinn confirmed, saying, "Yes." One of Keanu Reeves' oddest roles has to be the serial killer from The Watcher, a movie with a sad 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. According to Reeves, he never wanted to do it, and he was forced into it. He told the Calgary Sun, "I never found the script interesting, but a friend of mine forged my signature on the agreement. I could not prove he did, and I didn't want to get sued for not honoring my contract, so I had no other choice but to do the film." Reeves was held to a year-long silence about the film, but rumors started circulating early that suggested he was upset right from the start, particularly about the size of his role, which had started out small but later became the center of the film. He couldn't talk about it until 12 months after the release, though, and he didn't. When it premiered, Reeves refused to do any promotion for the film, and according to reviews, maybe they should have just let him out of the contract, as he was almost universally condemned as being completely wrong for playing a serial killer. Keanu Reeves first became a household name when he starred as the less-than-quick-witted Ted Theodore Logan in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and the world also hasn't let him forget about it. When he went on Zach Galifianakis' Between Two Ferns the movie, he was asked questions like,
"On a scale of 1 to 100, how many words do you know?"
That's supposed to be funny, but it's also pretty harsh too. GQ says this image wasn't helped by Reeves' early interactions with the press, where he was clearly uncomfortable with being on the receiving end of question after question. He told Rolling Stone that it's very frustrating and that he gets no respect. What do coworkers have to say about Reeves' intelligence? Richard Linklater, who directed him in A Scanner Darkly, told Esquire, "It would be one of the biggest misreadings you could ever do to say that's not a super intelligent person." The Matrix's Lawrence Fishburne agreed, saying, "He's also incredibly curious and intelligent. It takes intelligence to be funny. His comic timing is excellent. He's survived because he's managed to evolve with the business we're in. That's down to curiosity and intelligence. So, cut him some slack." When Cycle World talked to Keanu Reeves about the founding of his own motorcycle company, Arch, they found that his love of bikes went all the way back to learning how to ride when he was 22 years old. He was working in Munich at the time, he told them, and asked a girl at the soundstage if she could give him a quick lesson on how the whole thing worked. She did, he said, and she showed him where everything was and that he was immediately hooked. As soon as he got back to Los Angeles, he bought his first bike and never looked back. He told the outlet, "Over the years, I would buy used bikes whenever I worked." However, it was Nortons that were his true love. "I loved the shape of them, the upswept pipes, and then I came to love the smell of them and how they rode." He still has the very first one he bought, too. When he spoke with Esquire, he told them that he rode every day, whether it was for practical reasons or just to get out and away from things for a while. It's that obsession that led to Arch and his own business, founded alongside Gard Hollinger. After asking Hollinger to build him a custom bike, the two went into business together in 2011, according to the Los Angeles Times. It all started with that bike, which Reeves loved so much that he said he knew it was something they needed to share with the world.
You sound good, and you ride amazing!
Keanu Reeves' love of motorcycles is nothing short of legendary, but it turns out that he's paid quite a high price for it. What's it? Reeves told Esquire, "It's the physical sensation of riding, the wind, the smell, the sights, the connection to the machine, the living in nature." For him, it's also been a lot of injuries, going all the way back to 1988, when he took a hairpin corner too fast. He dumped the bike and says he laid there for around half an hour, convinced that he was going to die. He nearly did. He still has the scars, and he's missing his spleen thanks to the accident. Since then, there's been more surgeries, more scars, and more broken bones, including one bone that broke through the skin, which Reeves saw with his own eyes after taking a car bumper off with his right leg. Reeves spoke about the accident on The Graham Norton Show, where he revealed that it came just after he had a metal plate put into his neck. He spoke about the delay in deciding whether to dump the bike or go over the hood of the car, and by the time he decided, it was too late. Minutes later, he was sitting on the curb with a tooth broken in half, in shock. He shared this horrifying detail.
As I was sitting there, my skin was open on my shin, and bone white is very white.
And he kept going in detail, to the shock of the audience, Norton, and fellow guests.
So I kept touching it, and my friend was there. I was like, look how white that is. It looks crazy.
And yes, once the other person involved in the crash realized who he'd hit, they asked for an autograph. As it happens, some of Keanu's teeth are fake, also thanks to accidents. So which of these injuries was the worst? In an interview with Esquire, he said, "You know, it's weird. After the accidents, the adrenaline kicks in, so it's not really painful. Maybe the broken ribs part. That was pretty uncomfortable." Keanu Reeves might be almost insanely good at a lot of things, but one thing he's apparently not good at is playing in a band. In the mid-90s, Reeves was already a pretty big star when he decided to start a band with a guy he met in the grocery store. They called it Dogstar, and they weren't terrible. They were, according to GQ, serviceable. Reeves says otherwise, remembering that time they decided to play a Grateful Dead cover song at Milwaukee Metal Fest. "We were like, they hate us. What are we doing here? What can we do? Let's do the Grateful Dead cover." They were just like, you suck." I had the biggest grin on my face, man. He added that the worst part wasn't his public roasting, but what happened to the other guys, honest musicians who were just trying to make a go of it. But he added, "I guess it would have helped if our band was better." But there's good news. Vice talked to Dogstar's Rob Mailhouse, and even though he says they absolutely weren't ready to start performing when they did have Weezer open for them, and Bon Jovi asked them to go on tour with them. That's not too shabby. Being in the public eye can be accompanied by strange attention from strangers, and Keanu Reeves has definitely had that. In 2008, a lawsuit against him went to trial. At the heart of the issue was a photographer named Alison Silva, who claimed he had been trying to get photos of Reeves when the actor hit him with his car, breaking his wrist. Reeves had a different story. He was visiting a relative in a hospital, Silva had followed him, and then tripped over himself and fell. With the help of an emergency room doctor, who said the injury was an old one, and a contemporaneous video of not-so-injured Silva climbing a fence to get a peek at Britney Spears, the Los Angeles Times says it took just an hour for the jury to clear Reeves. Then, 2009 took an even weirder turn when Reeves was sued by Karen Sala. Sala claimed that he was the father of her 4 adult children, and that she was entitled to $3 million a month for her support and another $150,000 a month in child support. Retroactive, of course. In spite of Reeves saying he had never met the woman and a DNA test proving he wasn't their father, the case still went to court. Sala claimed that the DNA evidence was tampered with, that Reeves had used hypnosis to do something nefarious, and that he had, at one point, disguised himself as her ex-husband. Fortunately for Reeves, it was immediately dismissed, according to The Star. Even some of Reeves' characters have been at the heart of lawsuits. Reeves lent his voice to Toy Story 4's Duke Kaboom, a character the Evel Knievel estate said was deliberately created to make viewers think Knievel was somehow associated with the film. It wasn't, and he wasn't, and according to Bloomberg, a Nevada federal court judge ultimately dismissed the suit.
Duke Kaboom, Canada's greatest stuntman. Oh yeah. Yes.
Speed was a huge hit, and Keanu Reeves spent much of the movie shoot learning lines for another project, Hamlet, a production that was staged at the 789-seat Manitoba Theatre Center. While Reeves' turn as one of Shakespeare's most iconic characters was somewhat unfairly maligned, it turns out that heavy reading is kind of his thing. Reeves hosted a Reddit thread where he invited participants to ask him anything, and they did, with one person wanting to know what his favorite books were. The list was long, and it started with his childhood favorites The Count of Monte Cristo and Lord of the Rings, then teenage faves Fyodor Dostoevsky, William Gibson, and Marcel Proust. In other interviews, he talked about reading all 1.3 million words in 7 volumes of Proust's In Search of Lost Time. along with things like treatises from ancient Rome and the works of Philip K. Dick, another all-time favorite author. When asked by Esquire if his diagnosis of dyslexia made him wish to read even more, he remained vague, saying, "I don't know. If I had to pen it to anything, my step-grandfather worked for Encyclopedia Britannica. In my room, I would just open them up. There was a curiosity there. I really enjoyed it." When Keanu Reeves headed to The Late Show with Stephen Colbert in 2021, they got talking about how his most recent movies saw him returning to play characters he'd played before: Ted Logan, John Wick, and Neo. When Colbert asked if there was another character he'd like to revisit, Reeves hardly hesitated.
I would love to play John Constantine again from the Constantine.
There was a but, though. He'd tried and failed. According to Screen Rant, Constantine was originally supposed to kick off a whole series. When it was released in 2005, reception was lukewarm to say the least, but the movie gained momentum and a cult following over the years. Reeves isn't the only one who wants a sequel, and Peter Stormare, who played Lucifer opposite Reeves' detective, had even hinted at the possibility that a sequel was coming. Aside from hints and wishes, Constantine 2 remains little more than a wish and a dream. But given how determined Reeves remained to see the third Bill and Ted movie made, maybe all hope should not be lost after all. Keanu Reeves is pretty famous for doing his own stunts, but the extent of his stunt work makes it worth talking about. Death Defying doesn't even begin to cover it. When Reeves went on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert in 2021, he was asked what the wildest thing he ever needed to do for a movie was. He responded with a rather boring jump off a building, but when Colbert asked for more details, that's when the truth got nothing short of jaw-dropping. The stunt was for The Matrix Resurrections, and it wasn't just any building. It was a 46-story building. He and Carrie-Anne Moss really, honest to gosh, jumped. And not once, but 19 times. He explained what he did with the fear he felt.
You have to block that. You not block it, but deal with it, absorb it, and then just be there and do. And that's what we did.
Reeves went on to confirm that, yes, the stunts were a little harder to do than they had been years ago during the first Matrix, and the recovery time was a little longer, but that he still loved doing it. And that included everything from jumping off buildings to martial arts to the trick writing he learned for John Wick, according to People magazine. That's not to say that Reeves doesn't have stunt doubles. He does. Metro talked to Jeremy Fry, who was Reeves' stunt double for John Wick. That's him jumping the Mustang sideways in John Wick 2. He confirmed, "Reeves is a giver. He is selfless. He works tirelessly. Every good thing you've heard about him is 110% true."
You're breathtaking!
You're breathtaking!
There are a ton of famous memes out there, but one of the best is Sad Keanu. He's sitting on a park bench eating his lunch, and he looks like he's just had the worst day of his life. Anyone who doesn't want to just give him a hug and maybe take him to get a chocolate milkshake has no soul. But what exactly was going on in that picture? Stephen Colbert wanted to know too, and asked him when he appeared on The Late Show in 2021. He explained,
I was thinking. I had some stuff going on.
Sure.
I was hungry.
Colbert also asked him why he thinks he's so memeable, and he said that he had no idea, but he didn't seem to mind and even broke into song.
Meme on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend.
The year after the meme of a seemingly sad Keanu Reeves went viral,